Sibeko has a tough task at hand. He's effectively responsible for the visual identity of the World Cup in June and July. This includes branding, signage and flags at airports, stadia and FIFA headquarters. He joins us now to take the discussion further.
Plus, our guest host Patrick Robertson and publisher at Affinity Publishing, Preston, are here to add their views and comments. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Mandla, how did it come about for you to land this project?
Well, we started exactly 3 years ago, looking at the opportunity that South Africa was going to host the World Cup. In fact, we started looking at the opportunity really during the bidding process. That's when I started to understand what branding and signage really entails in a World Cup environment. So we've since worked the journey, understanding what was done in the German World Cup, and created a partnership with one of the largest branding and signage company in the world, Icon International, and bringing them to South Africa and setting up Icon South Africa, of which I'm a 40% shareholder. We obviously had to create the setup. South Africa has never hosted an event like this. We had created a factory environment, started almost creating a thesis in terms of how we were going to approach the bidding process. We did, and we were successful. So it's been a combination of looking at local expertise as well as international expertise. So we've looked, our skills really vary from guys who worked on a number of events, including the Beijing Olympics, the German World Cup, people who actually have FIFA experience, as well as South Africans who've worked in events in and around South Africa and anywhere else.
What touch points are you exactly responsible for?
Well, with every World Cup, the World Cup comes as a package, and I've been telling a lot of people that that's one thing I have learned and I have accepted. And it doesn't matter where it is in the world, it comes as a package. So one component is definitely signage and branding. And what we're responsible for is really the visual outlook of the World Cup. There is only one look and feel for the World Cup, and each city starts to take a different look and feel, starting from the FIFA 2010 World Cup look, which then is incorporated into the cities. So we are basically responsible for executing the requirements of FIFA and the 2010 World Cup, in the sense that, when I said earlier, it's a package, is that they have the responsibility to their sponsors, FIFA does, anywhere else in the world, just like they are in South Africa. So we would take care of the branding, the experience from the time you arrive at the airport for the first time in South Africa, right through to your protocol routes, to the stadiums, to the international broadcast center, all those backdrops, as well as the rooms in the actual stadiums, your directional signage. We would constitute or create components, and as well as the buses, official residences of the team.
Everything, yeah?
About everything, really. Yeah.
Well, Patrick, I'm just going to bring you in quickly. At what point, Mandla's got quite a task at hand right now, but at what point do you think this is the right branding for the World Cup?
Well, I think we've experienced already the FIFA, all the regulations, the design regulations. I'm sure you're experiencing right now. The amount of regulations and how you're supposed to put everything together just so, it has more books than the Old Testament. It very much is the style guide and the actual discipline of putting something together is not even this thick, it's mountains. I mean, that's what I was going to actually ask you next, how you're dealing with that kind of regulation, because it's pretty strict.
It is very strict, and I said earlier that we're very fortunate that we partnered with a company that had already done the World Cup, and one of the first things that was top of the list was definitely the FIFA requirements being very strict. So we have worked the journey, basically. With every World Cup, everybody learns in the process. I think the local organizing committee also learned a lot. A lot of us, including them, had never done an event like this. So we were fortunate that we have actually guided each other on this journey to saying, well, FIFA would definitely not want this in Germany. This is how it happened, and so on and so on. But you're absolutely right. The requirements are very strict. And that's why earlier on I said it's almost like we wrote a thesis in terms of how to meet those requirements.
Very interesting thesis. Ken, from your side, we're talking branding, we're talking branding South Africa particularly during the World Cup. Do you think we're ready?
I haven't seen that much of it, to tell you the truth, the branding. I presume it's more of it's going overseas. So I couldn't really judge by that. It's all we see is really FIFA. Now we're starting to see billboards and flags going up, but only really the last week or two.
You don't think it's enough?
Well, I assume there's a lot more to come. I hope it's going to be like a massive fairground.
And don't you think internal branding is key here? So we're living the brand inside out, making all South Africans a brand ambassador?
For our visitors?
Yeah.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I don't know, I'm a little nervous, to tell you the truth, because we drove through Hillbrow yesterday, and I hope people don't wander off into Hillbrow. There could be all sorts of things happening out there. But I think most people in South Africa are patriotic and are friendly, so with a bit of luck they'll look after the visitors.
Well, Ken's a bit nervous. Are you nervous, Mandla?
I'm not really nervous at all. You know, I was just saying that in the last couple of months I've been traveling around the world. I just had the opportunity to spend a week in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania during the World Economic Forum on Africa. And I mean, the mere fact that South Africa's hosting this event was very visible. Everywhere I went to speak about what I was doing in South Africa, everybody was clear that, please, we come into the World Cup. So, I mean, there were over 500 sort of young global leaders who were very optimistic. So I think it is exciting. It is a lot of work, and I think Ken just spoke about whether do we look like we're ready. Obviously, this is the biggest test for South Africa, and I say this all the time, that everything about us, our unity, our preparedness, the mere fact that we have come so long, so far away as a country, will be tested through this World Cup. Our economy, the spirit of Ubuntu that we say we have as South Africans will be tested for the first time. I do think also when a World Cup takes place, cities must take ownership. South Africans must take ownership. FIFA can only do so much. And I think perhaps our cities have been behind. And I think Johannesburg as a city looks like it's the one city that's been behind, because I've been to Cape Town. I've been amazed at the amount of branding, just the excitement and the vibe on the street when you arrive. The same thing in Durban.
That's what you're seeing. That's what I'm finding encouraging. Is it's not being pushed by external now. It's been picked up by the man in the street. And even if it's an expatriate, or it's from Germany, or it's from England, or from wherever, you'll have on one side of the mirror the German or English flag, and then the South African flag on the side, and then flags all over the place. People are decorating their motorbikes, and this is not being paid for. This is just coming from the people, and that's what you're starting to see now, which is really encouraging. That sense of patriotism and pride. It's not just about hoping to finally get through to XYZ rounds. It's about we're in it, and that's what people are picking up, which is really great to see.
Tall and proud.
Absolutely. Well, there's no doubt that brands influence social history, art, literature, and reflect the times we live in. Branding in South Africa dates back 200 years. Brands that existed then are still part of our society today, such as Nederburg, Mrs. Balls, and Joko Tea. So why not create a brand museum to house these iconic brands? Well, Ken Preston has just done that. So, Ken, what was the idea behind creating a brand museum?
Well, it was really inspired just by some research we stumbled across. We found a whole library, an archive of very early brand trademark registrations in Cipro. They had come up from the Cape Colony in the 1800s, and to see these original registrations for Enos and Bovril and a whole range of not just imported, but obviously Castle Lager and many, many others. Was fascinated, and it suddenly made you realize that branding isn't just a now thing. Okay, branding as we know it is a now, today is a now thing, but back then it started off, and it has a long history. The trademark really sort of kicked it off, and from then on it just grew and grew and grew, and it really started, as I say, in Cape Town. First ad agency was 1898. First newspaper was 1800. First patent attorneys or intellectual property attorneys was 1875. I mean, I've been publishing brands and branding for 17 years, and it never occurred to me to think back that far. And I think if we can bring that alive in a museum, people are going to find it fascinating, they're going to learn from it, they can be inspired from it. earlier on we were talking about serendipity, you know, seeing something on the wall and it sparks off an idea. You can see an awful lot of things in a brand museum that can spark off ideas. And we want it to be a venue. We want not just a showcase, we want to have something happening, exhibitions, workshops, seminars,
well, that was
product
my
launches.
question, because at the moment it's only online. So are there any plans to have a physical museum?
Oh yes, very much so. We went online because we haven't got any money, and we wanted to create awareness for it. You know, when you said to people, we're going to do a brand museum, they go, a brand museum? And, you know, after about a year, people are beginning to sort of get the idea, that they're beginning to think that it exists somewhere. And now we want to do that. We want to do that in the first half of next year. We're looking for suitable, spacious premises in Rosebank if we can find them, because we think that's a very good place to access with the rear via and the Gautrain and the motorway, and Rosebank is very pedestrian friendly. So we will be knocking on a lot of doors in the next 6 months looking for help in doing that.
Well, Ken, over the past 5 years, in terms of branding, what are some of the trends that you're seeing that's setting in?
Branding?
Yeah, on its own.
I mean,
how much of it has changed?
I mean, branding is so huge. I mean, advertising, branding are joined at the hip, and you know, all the communications have been in turmoil with online and social channels and everything. I mean, it's. I'm actually not qualified to comment on that. I'm a publisher, not a branding guru. I much prefer to sort of look back a bit. Our books look back at the last year. Okay, you're saying last couple of years.
Patrick, do you think, is it important to have a brand museum?
Well, we were actually just joking earlier that which brand would want to be in the museum. But absolutely, they've got a story to tell. So yes, I think that there's an incredible history with brands and where they've come from, where they started and where they are now, and what they had to traverse to get there. So the story is worth telling. You don't have money to tell the story about your history generally, so you tell people what they want to hear now. But there is definitely a place for people to know how it started.
We find people don't focus very much on their heritage at the moment. I think they should more, because heritage makes consumer comfortable. They like to feel they've known you. They like to maybe think they remember you from their parents' times. And I think that, you know, a lot of the big brands around today have heritage that goes back over 100 years. So the people who haven't got to 100 years should also think about it and promote that. You know, if you've been around for 20 years, you're doing quite well. You've been around longer than Google.
Then what did you say is the recipe to have that longevity of 100 years? As a brand?
Time, survive. Oh, you mean how do you survive for 100 years?
How do you sustain
you're asking me a sort of branding advertising
years?
question again. I think you build trust, you respond to the market, to consumer culture, you renew your image, you make a brand promise and stick to it.
Could it be reinvention with the times?
All the time. All the time. There's so many things in branding. It's very complex. These gentlemen can explain it better than I can.
You might find that, you know, look, it's pretty much a guessing game, because you just brought up Google and then you ask, well, how did that all happen overnight? And things will happen overnight from now on. Time is getting shorter as you're getting older. Time seems to pass quicker. But certainly, brands, I like to see it as consistency, but adaptability. I know they sound like they don't actually fit in the same part, but they do, because you have to maintain your voice and your personality, but adapt to the conditions and become new within who you are, rather than trying to completely reinvent yourself all the time.
But you still need constancy. You change too much, and the consumers are not going to know who you are. You're quite likely going to alienate them.
Yeah, it's also, you know, I think even with the World Cup experience, again, it's consistency and adaptability. I mean, to adapt to any environment with. You know, what FIFA's looking for is exactly that, those two components. So what you get here in South Africa will be very much, through the World Cup, will be very much an experience that you would have, a component of it you'd have experienced in the German World Cup. So, yeah.
In terms of branding, what do you think from the 2010 FIFA World Cup should go into the brand museum?
Well, I think, you know, it's really, there's so much. I mean, look, I think the
what
most...
stands out the most?
What stands out the most for me is that this is, I call it the biggest test for South Africa and for the continent. There's a lot of things that will go out, images from South Africa just depicting South Africa, breaking the stereotype, you know, the way that the rest of the world has perceived us. And I think those kind of things will very much play a big part in the, I would think would play a big part in the museum. But also, you know what, it's historically it is the first time this event has come to Africa, and no one knows if it will ever come back. So there's a lot of material and the interaction from the different countries. Just a few days ago I was speaking to an advisor to the president in Tanzania, who was telling me that in Tanzania they don't feel like you know, there's a World Cup coming. So, you know, there's a lot of things that I think could be part and parcel.
We should have a permanent exhibition for the next few years, remembering this occasion.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a good idea.
Anniversary every year.
And also, you know what, artists, I mean, look, the Goodman Gallery has just started an exhibition about just a week ago, celebrating 20 years, or the journey that South Africa has walked with over 40 artists from around the world. So there's a lot of things that it just really depends.
The question, I think, also on branding, saying who'd want to go to a museum. I think, you know, when you're younger, you want, like 16, you want to be 25, and when you're 65, you want to be 18. So, and also branding is a matter of survival. I think if we go all the way back to the Neanderthal days and way back then, we branded ourselves to say, hey, you know, don't hit me with a rock. I'm from the same clan. And in those days, a matter of survival. I think today it still is.
And nostalgia is something that plays a part in all our lives. We're drawn to things that
And it's
have pleasant memories for us.
Yeah,
and it's
education.
It's interesting.